This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm speaking with Allan Savory. Allan was born in Zimbabwe and educated in South Africa. Through his experiences in game ranching, Allan developed the philosophy of holistic management.
So desertification, which has been a problem destroying many civilizations for 10,000 years, is actually not a problem. It's a symptom of biodiversity loss, which is now hitting 2/3 of the world's land.
In 2009, Allan, his wife Jody Butterfield, and several colleagues founded the Savory Institute in Boulder, Colorado, an international network of leaders committed to putting holistic management into practice. Allan, thanks for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Justin.
So tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
Well, I grew up in what was Rhodesia. It's now Zimbabwe.
And your parents?
They grew up in Africa, Southern Africa. Their parents before that came from Scotland and England.
And so can you summarize your career and intellectual pursuits?
I'll try to do it as briefly as I can, Justin. Like so many people, I ended up doing not what I wanted to. Going into the game department, I wasn't an academic. I was too young to go into a game department. They had a minimum joining age of 25 in Africa because of the dangers of the job. And so a godfather of mine who was a game ranger advised my father to make me go to university. So I went to university just to become older. And by the time I'd graduated, I was 20 with just a basic undergraduate degree. And the game department very kindly made an exception. And so I actually joined at 20. And I wanted to just become the world's expert on elephants. I loved elephants. I wanted to do elephant control, work with them, elephant research. But for one reason or another, I got promoted very quickly into a pretty senior position, found myself in charge of a large area of what was northern Rhodesia, Zambia now, and about, I think, almost 2/3 of the country's future national parks. And they were deteriorating very badly. We were losing biodiversity. I was the man in charge. I was really just a kid with a degree, but I felt the responsibility greatly, and I didn't know what to do. I was so keen for answers and fanatical as a young conservationist, I guess we would have called us.
Allan, maybe describe what you were seeing on the land. You mentioned desertification a moment ago. Like, what were you seeing, and what was happening to the land that you saw?
Trees were dying wholesale, riverbanks were collapsing, bare ground was increasing, soil erosion, species were disappearing completely of plants and animals, and that shouldn't be happening in a future national park under professional management.
And so those formative experiences in noticing the land degrading, how did you set about trying to understand the root causes of that?
I can only say that I did with great difficulty. I had no guidance. I read all the early ecologists, and I was saying, this doesn't make sense to me. I cannot see how we can be studying animal ecology. I don't think there is such a thing, because I cannot see how animals can exist without plants. What I was saying is right. There's only ecology. So I was having that problem of trying to sort all this out. And really, I just had to begin from scratch. And I became extremely determined to solve the problem because I was involved in a time in history when the colonialism was dying, British Empire was dying. I was in the tail end of that. This was happening, and I was seeing that it wasn't just wildlife that was being affected, that poor land, because we were just seeing land degradation, meant poor people, poverty, poaching, violence, war. So, and then I was getting increasingly involved in the war and commanding a tracker combat unit in the war. So, I was involved in all aspects of it. And then I went into politics as an angry young army officer, determined to try to end the stupidity and the bloodshed. So I got involved in every aspect of this problem.
You mentioned a moment ago that how it was flummoxing to sort of think of ecology in terms of the domains, fire ecology, animal ecology, plant ecology. Sounds like your realization is this is an entire system and cannot be reduced to a single department. And yet we have these academic institutions that are organized that way. And that problem of organization manifests in other areas of society as well, other institutions. Is that realization starting to emerge? Is that helping you guide your decision to become an independent scientist and pursue it in your own terms?
I worked with two wonderful American professors who were Fulbright scholars. They came to Africa. Archie Mosman, who's still alive, who was a professor at Humboldt, and Ray Dasman. So, because these two gentlemen had come to Africa with the idea of game ranching and giving wildlife a value, thinking that if we could get rid of livestock, we could rewild, as they called it today. We could heal the land under wildlife. And I had come to the same conclusion about 3 years earlier, but didn't know about them. So when I learned about them, we got working together and we got game ranching started. But once more, we proved wrong because all the national parks are still deteriorating.
Right.
But not just there, but in the United States. If you go to national parks in New Mexico, Arizona, etc., you'll see terrible deterioration.
And why is that happening? What's the process?
Well, the process took me, as I say, a long time to work out. I tried with the American Fulbright scholars developing game ranching. As I said, we proved wrong. All the game ranches kept deteriorating. We could get an improvement in the wildlife population, but I was still seeing soil erosion increasing, droughts and floods increasing, environmental degradation continuing. And then I read in a Farmers Weekly magazine about a fellow in South Africa, a botanist, who was mapping the expansion of the Karoo Desert. And that was John Acox. And John, who was a botanist, not a range scientist, had written this article saying that South Africa was understocked, too few livestock, and overgrazed. And it caused a furore in the scientific community in America and South Africa. But to me, it was new thinking. So I called John and went down and visited him to see what he was doing. And he had concluded that selective grazing was the problem by livestock, and that they selected one species and then killed it out, then selected another species, and so on. So he was trying to solve it by crowding them together, dividing the land into 16 units, and forcing the animals to graze every plant and then move them on. So I went and looked at farms he was working with. I couldn't accept all of his reasoning, but I was there to learn. And on one of the farms that he was working with, it was winter, there'd been a snowstorm, and the sheep had accidentally crowded into a corner. And I went to open a gate, and I saw what I was looking for, healthier land in that corner. And so I dropped the gate and walked over there. And the farmer and his wife came over and said, "What are you so excited about?" And I said, "This." I said, "These sheep are improving the land at this spot." And that was an aha moment when I realized, oh my God, humans have been condemning livestock for 10,000 years. They are the key to this, because we can control their movements, their behavior. But then I went back to Rhodesia and immediately began thinking, now, how on earth do we do this? We, we are going to have to use livestock. There is no other alternative for humans. And I stress that. It cannot be done with fire, it cannot be done with technology, and it cannot be done by resting the land. There is nothing left to humans to do.
So you're describing what emerged as holistic management, and you and your colleagues have built the Savory Institute as a means for promoting and educating people about the value of holistic management. Before we talk about how folks and institutions have maybe failed to implement it, can you talk about places where it is working? Are there success stories other than your own experience?
We did an international trial known as the Charter Trials. It was observed by Americans who plagiarized the work in Texas. There were advanced projects we did with a London-based company on land in Rhodesia, and there were hundreds of cases of successful ranches on 5 countries where I was working in Africa before I came to America, and then we began to get examples over here. So there have been endless examples. Academics have always rejected them, even the international trials, saying they're anecdotal,
Okay.
which of course is just academic behavior.
And so, Allan, we haven't even mentioned the term climate change in this conversation. I've heard you say that this mismanagement of land, desertification, and all the associated degradations that poor management choices have caused is perhaps driving climate change more than fossil fuel consumption, or at least to a highly significant degree. How do you think about that?
What I see happening and what I believe and would pretty well stake my life on is what we can take for absolute certain is that biodiversity loss worldwide is appalling in the oceans, forests, grasslands of the world, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's appalling. And so desertification is occurring in about 2/3 of the world's land, including in the United States. And desertification does not occur without biodiversity loss. So desertification, which has been a problem destroying many civilizations for 10,000 years, is actually not a problem. It's a symptom of biodiversity loss, which is now hitting 2/3 of the world's land. If you take 1 square meter of land and make it bare because you lose biodiversity, grass, litter, soil cover, it is far, far hotter at midday and far, far colder at dawn than it is if that same piece of land is covered with litter
Right.
or grass. What I know for certain is if we'd never invented or thought of burning coal, we still would have been facing a change of climate produced by humans. And I loved a talk I heard by Dr. Elizabeth Sartoris, and she showed a color slide of a little spacecraft up in space looking at the Earth, and the Earth was rotating, and you could see these big, dry desert areas right across North Africa, across into India, up into China, United States. I mean, it's 2/3 of the world. And she made this statement that if we had been in space for the last 50,000 years observing Earth, we would have described humans as a desert-making species. I love that statement.
Yeah.
It's the biggest change we've made on Earth. Now, you go to climate conferences and all these Davos and all these things, and they hardly ever even mention desertification. All they mention is burning goddamn coal and oil. Now, as I've said many times in public, and I believe this to be totally true, if we stop burning coal and oil tomorrow, totally, climate change will continue with hardly any change. I think we're completely overrating the importance of the carbon coming from fossil fuels and underrating what's happening to the world, to biodiversity, desertification, agriculture being the most destructive industry the world's ever known, more destructive than any mining or anything we've ever done. And we're ignoring that.
We'll be back to my conversation with Allan Savory after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com.
Hi, this is Sheila Stearns, Commissioner Emerita of the Montana University System and former President of the University of Montana. You are listening to one of my favorite podcasts, A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Allan Savory about using livestock to heal the landscape. Allan, can we press on the agriculture piece? Because in this conversation, you've talked about how the land needs more livestock, properly managed, but the more livestock than less. One might think that agriculture involves more livestock on the land. What's the disconnect? Help us understand how the popular version of agriculture is contributing to the problem versus the holistic management practice that you propose.
Okay, let me try. I think most people think of agriculture as crop production.
Okay.
So I always spell out that agriculture is the production of food and fiber, natural fiber, from the world's land and waters. So the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the forests, the grasslands, the deserts, the Icelandic caps, they're all involved in agriculture. And so the whole of our earth at the moment is involved in agriculture. There's very little that isn't. When you take the ocean fisheries, etc., we're losing biodiversity, etc., all over it. Now, if you look at general figures, about 6% of that is cropland.
Okay.
If we look at the land alone, most countries, it's around about 20% roughly, including the United States, is involved in cropland production. So if we take the part of the world that is involved in the production of food and fiber from biodiversity, it's not coming from anything else, all right, it's of the non-cropland, it's 94% of the world, and we're hardly talking about it. If we look at the land portion alone, there's roughly 80% of that, the food and fiber, is coming from wildlife, forests, etc., and livestock in many cases. So livestock is a very crucial role to play. Now, desertification, and I don't want to repeat what we've said, is a major problem that we have to cater for because it's leading to all the emigration to Europe. It's changing the political face of Europe. There's a good reason why the most violent region of the world is Middle East, where civilizations have been failing because of desertification for so long. As scientists, when we get involved in management, all right, we have to use a tool. So for 99% of human existence, we only had technology. That was Stone Age tools. And we couldn't change the environment any more than an otter, a crow, any other tool-using animal. And then we discovered fire, how to use it, and then how to make it, and then we could melt stones and go into the copper, the bronze, the Iron Age, and everything in the room you're in, everything around me, the clothes I'm in, computer we're using, everything around us was made possible by fire. Without fire, it couldn't have been possible.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the two tools we have. So we've got to get agriculture producing the food and fiber we want. We've got to reverse desertification and biodiversity loss. And over 2/3 of the world, as I described, all right, it's where the rainfall is seasonal, and particularly where it's low, it is impossible to do with fire, because fire is rapid oxidation and it exposes soil. So now we're left with one tool, technology. Now, there is no technology even imaginable in science fiction that could, on 2/3 of the world, deal with billions of tons of vegetation that grow every year in 3 or 4 months of rain and then dry off over 6 or 8 or 9 months or whatever of no rain and start to oxidize in sunlight. That's just a sheer impossibility.
And the simple insight is the animals need to play the role.
Absolutely. We've got to play the role with animals. Now, that means playing the role as we're doing in Africa on our hub there. We're using elephants, giraffe, buffalo, kudu, sable, impala, craybuck, bushbuck, stembuck, sable, waterbuck, you name it, and cattle and sheep and goats. But the cattle, sheep, and goats, we can control more. So think of them like a bulldozer that can't be parked. So we have to be planning where they are all the time. And they don't use diesel and they don't pollute.
Right.
They're doing nothing but good. But you have to be on top of your game because you can't park them at any time.
So, Allan, our paths crossed in a meeting of a big group of scientists and land managers and entrepreneurs and folks that have an interest in trying to move us forward. We've described in this conversation a lot of how we're stuck and how getting humans out of the way in some ways can help us move forward. But what would you say to groups that are trying to move us forward? How do we do that?
What the group that we're working with and trying to help are doing is they're acknowledging the enormous problems that are associated with biodiversity loss, land degradation, increasing droughts, floods, etc. So they're very aware of that, and they're looking for entrepreneurial ways to deal with that. They're looking for research, data, more information. Now, every bit of information they need is already available. They're not aware of that because they all only work in the silo of their training. And what you and I have been talking about cuts across all disciplines.
Yes.
Okay, so they're not aware that what they're looking for is already available. Now, so what they're really doing, it's not a research problem. Ideally, if we could wave a magic wand, is just get one of the states, Montana would be a good one, to just say to the top person, the governor, look, this is a management problem. Why don't you just talk with the Savory Institute, who've been dealing with this for over 50 years, and just have a discussion with them and see what's possible? Because I promise you, all the knowledge they need is already available. And this is management at scale. Everything that our group is trying to do will be done through policy. Everything, because that's how we manage at scale. We manage through policy. Now, what does policy manage? We produce millions of things: music, food, beef, white wheat, wine, cheese, bombs, computers, buildings, bridges. We produce millions of things. We don't manage them, but we produce them through managing our families, our small businesses and communities, and our institutions. In other words, we manage humans to try to improve our lives. Now, the first thing we have to do then is to manage the economy, because if the organization or the family go broke, they're out of the game. So the family or the organization has to finance itself and manage that. And only then are they now managing the environment, nature, our life-supporting environment, whether it be ocean or lake or river. They're managing that to produce everything that sustains humans, including all the forms of food. So what Montana is lacking is they don't have people who have expertise in facilitating how the governor and the government of Montana can manage institutions, the economy, and the land indivisibly and simultaneously to produce the food that Montana needs.
And so finally, Allan, how would you advise, a listener, an average citizen who wants to contribute to making the world a better place and buys into the logic of what you're describing here, how can they contribute?
Well, they've only got three things they can do. They can be apathetic, which obviously we don't want, or they can support the many groups of good people and organizations who are supporting and promoting regenerative agriculture, regenerative economies, etc. And that leads to incremental change we've been, in my lifetime, over 60 years, in fact, roughly 70 years on that, and we are losing ground. The people promoting anti-meat, Davos, global finance, driving environmental destruction is just swamping us. So they can keep doing that. And if we're lucky, 100, 200 years from now, somebody will change and deal with the cause of the problem. Nobody is even talking about the cause of the problem today. All right, so the other thing an average citizen could do is to say, I need to get involved and try to get, say, the governor of one state, one sovereign state, to just talk to people who have some skill in managing the complexity, because then within 1 to 2 years, you could see the whole situation beginning to turn around in complete harmony without any disagreement, because what is causing the problem is also causing the conflicts in society. And that is what is causing the problem is not a lack of knowledge, as I've stressed, but it is the way in which all environmental organizations, governments, universities, institutions develop policy. That is all that is causing the problem.
Well, Allan, this has been a tremendous education. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience. If folks want to learn more about you and your work in the Savory Institute, where would you direct them?
Well, there's a website, that people can look up, and there's all sorts of self-help. We've got about more than 50 hubs in 30 countries.
I'm so grateful that our paths crossed, and hope we're visiting again down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Kelly Larson is our producer. Maddie Jordan is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. And Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.